Yes, welcome everyone, far and wide. We across Maryland today. Excellent. All right, so can you all see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up or excellent, thank you. We are going to start today with a brief introduction of who we are. We have a bunch of folks in the room who, let me turn off my own selfie real quick. There we go. Bunch of folks in the room from all different walks of instructorhood. So we have our seasoned instructors, our national trainers in the room, as well as many of you who have been instructing across Maryland and maybe across the country for many years. And then we have some brand new, just trained over the last couple of months. I recognize some of your names as well. So excited to see you all here today. As I mentioned, Ann and I are part of the Mental Health Association of Maryland. We are the sole provider of instructor trainings in the state of Maryland. And we are so excited to be able to continue supporting you all through the last couple years of transitions, as well as the exciting opportunities that are coming down the pike to us. So we are excited to be that conduit between the National Council and you all instructors and your first aiders. The National Council of Mental Wellbeing is our parent organization. They provide us those guidelines, the fidelity model, the curricula, all of that good stuff. They are the ones that make this possible. So it is exciting to be a representation of them and be able to make this little Maryland family our own as well. The intention of this webinar, there are things that we can control about instruction, and there are some things that are out of our control. The transitions between Cornerstone, actually virtual instruction, Cornerstone, and Connect, there are a lot of pieces that we can only provide feedback on. So that is something today that we can help collect, or at least point you in the right direction to provide that feedback, because you are hosting those classes and you have the best feedback. But please know that we are not in charge of everything. So if we could change it immediately, we would. But you know, learning together is really important, and that is what we're here to do. As I mentioned, and most of you have seen that pop up on screen, this is mostly a reminder for me to record if I hadn't started already, but we are recording this. So if you need it or want it afterwards, let me know. A brief agenda for today. We are going to look at a demo for those of you who have not been in Mental Health First Aid Connect yet. We are going to jump in there and just show you very briefly what it looks like from a first aider perspective and the instructor. I'm going to point you out to some high priority links. So that does include the request assistance form, as well as some other links that I would recommend bookmarking or saving. Some incredibly useful resources that are located in Connect. If you haven't kind of parsed through what all that information in there is, I'm going to point out some that could be really useful for those of you who are just starting in Connect, those of you who are trying to take the next business step with mental health first aid. There's a lot of really interesting documents in there, as well as some resources for your first aiders that you can use. Things that we are actively seeking information about from the National Council. So these are things that we don't necessarily have updates for, but I want you to know that we are asking for it. We are making sure that you are going to know as soon as we do. And then reviewing those questions that you submitted. We had a lot of good questions, a lot of best practices that I think, could come up together with, because you all are instructing those classes and know, you know, what has worked in Connect and what you can recommend to other people. And then some additional upcoming supports being offered by MHAMD and the National Council. So first off, we are going to start with a little bit of a demo. I'm going to pull up excellent. All right, so we got a hand raised. Michelle.
Did you Just say that you were, Leah, were you going to go over the users versus pending users later on?
Yes, we will get to that point.
All right.
Yep. All right. So as Anne alluded to a couple minutes ago, we are going to talk briefly about some really important links for you to keep in mind. So first and foremost is the Connect login page, and we will send out this PowerPoint to you so that you do not have to write it. We're not going to drop things in the chat right now. You are just going to get all of these links and a bunch of resources in a follow-up email. So don't worry really about trying to copy down links now, but these are recommended links for you to bookmark, to keep in mind that you can use them whenever you need, so nice and accessible. We have our Connect login page. We have the request assistance form. I know everyone's favorite way of communicating, but I do really recommend that you bookmark it and use it whenever you come across any type of glitch or want to provide any feedback for the National Council. The request assistance form is how you create a paper trail on your end and how the National Council can collect a bunch of data coming in about the system, and they will review it and they will hopefully make changes based on that information. But if you are just finding workarounds in this current system and not providing any of that feedback, then the system won't change. So making sure that you are submitting that request assistance form and then working with whatever situation you're working through at that point. Connect access. So something else to keep in mind, those of you who have not requested access yet, is that they are trying to get everyone into the Connect system in December. So please, 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 even if you don't have any inkling of teaching a class in the near future, request that access, log in so that you know everything is working, and then you can figure out when you want to teach in the upcoming year. Connect access form is a SurveyMonkey. You will get access within 7 days, 7 business days, I believe. For those of you who have submitted the request assistance form and have not heard anything back, I recommend going to the Connect login page and using that forgot password button to see if you can reset your account. What we are finding with Connect is that those automatic emails are getting swept into spam filters. Sounds familiar, I know. But it doesn't mean that the system isn't up to date. It just means that it didn't reach your inbox correctly. So if you have requested access, please make sure you are attempting to log in first before resubmitting and waiting another 7 days, because nobody's got time for that. The Connect feedback survey and the retroactive adding of classes. So they did have, the National Council had surveys out for both of these. I clicked on them today and they are now closed, but that means that you can always submit a request assistance form with this information in it because they are seeking it. So the Connect feedback survey was a 5-minute survey about people's experiences in the first month with the Connect system, transitioning over any information that they were requesting in it. So they are seeking this information, and since the Connect feedback survey is no longer open, I highly recommend that request assistance form for that feedback still. I do know someone asked a question about retroactively adding a class. They did have a survey as well recently in their like nationwide communications that provided some guidance on the retroactive class adding of in-person classes with in-person evaluations that were taught between January 1st and October 8th, so before the launch of Connect. And they are recommending that people now submit that request assistance form, and using this language, that retroactively adding a class, you can still add that information in. Any questions about these links? Again, we will send them out. If you have not requested access to Connect, please do. Even if you don't have any intention of teaching a class in the near future. And if you have requested access and have not heard anything, try to log in on the Connect page using that forgot password button and see if you are able to log in.
So Leah, what is going to be required of instructors once they request the access to Connect? What's an instructor going to need to do in terms of webinar self-education in order to actually be able to get into the system after asking for access?
Absolutely. So when you log in, you are onboarded or enrolled in an onboarding workshop. And it takes people different amounts of time. I think it took me about an hour. There is a quiz, and that quiz is fairly challenging. So making sure that you have all that information you can review. There is a 90-minute webinar, at least there was about a month ago, that you can watch, then walk through all the information before watching the mini videos. Whatever your learning style is best, you can watch that whole webinar. You can watch a bunch of mini videos that all say the same thing, or you can read the user guide. So those are all different things that you can kind of consume that information and then take this quiz. You can take the quiz as many times as you need. But that onboarding is required before you build a class. So making sure that you are giving yourself enough time between getting access to Connect, onboarding, and then building a class before you're teaching. I would not recommend doing it all in like a 2-week span, making sure that you give yourself much more time, because there's also the inviting and enrolling of users, which we'll talk about in a second, which is also a little more time-consuming process than in the Cornerstone system. So just giving yourself that kind of preemptive time to learn the system first and then build that class.
Leah, there's a question in the chat. I taught a course earlier this month and didn't add it ahead of time. Will I be able to?
That is a great question. I don't think so. I do think you need to request an assistance form though. Ask them. The National Council is in charge of the permissions and retroactively adding things. I do highly recommend, especially if it was an in-person class, which it sounds like it may have been.
Yeah, that was my question. It was in person and I have access to Connect and that is it. I haven't like gone through the whole webinar, everything. I don't have, a ton of free time. I know this isn't your guys' fault, but I should just go through National Council and get them to add it or give me credit for it or whatever.
Yeah, and yeah, that is all we are able to do at this point is redirect you to them. It's a weird grace period time that the in-person people, and we'll get to talking about the in-person classes through Connect as well, because there are some hoops to jump through for that. And I think the in-person classes, we just need to continue giving that feedback to the National Council. Okay. So Kaylin, if you wouldn't mind keeping us up to date, and I'll send out my email at the end, just letting us know where that is so that we can help other folks who are in the same boat with that. That would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for doing this, because as we all know, the National Council isn't the best communicators on this stuff. So good to know. Thank you.
It is, yes, a lot of juggling right now from everyone. So we appreciate you all being here as well.
And finally, Naima just said in the chat, what Leah, you just articulated, that all classes, including in-person only, have to go through Connect now.
Yes, and we will talk about that, in particular the in-person classes, because that is, I think, another pinch point for this system is the user invitation and enrollment, and in-person classes are where people are providing a lot of feedback. So we will talk about that at the end, because that was where a lot of questions were coming from. Resources. So we looked briefly at that resource tab in Connect, and I highly recommend, if you have not had the chance to go through it, once you're done onboarding, looking specifically at these Connect instructor supports. We have our Connect user guide, which is very comprehensive, step-by-step, how you manage how you build, how you manage, how you enroll, how you invite, everything that you could possibly wish, and always being updated. So checking out that Connect user guide and keeping it handy, especially for those first couple classes. There's an email reference guide. I find this really, really helpful because we are always independently emailing our participants. So this tells you when the system is automatically emailing your learners, so that you're not necessarily repeating the same information on the same day and they're getting inundated with emails from you and Connect. So instead you can kind of stagger them out and provide a more supportive reminder versus all in one day. In addition, they did just, they just pushed out a reporting document that helps you look at evaluations and exam scores. I know for many of you, this is a requirement for work to be able to submit reports. So playing around in there, the reports are much easier to pull, as well as prettier, if that is of interest to you, especially if you're using it for funding or for an employer requirement. They are a lot better than they were in Cornerstone, and I highly recommend, once you have a couple classes in the system, to start playing around in that reporting feature. They also have published recently the instructor 1 and 2 permissions. Based on if you're the first instructor or the second, your permissions in Connect change a little bit. So you can kind of see what instructor 2 or coordinators or instructor 1's, what power and permissions they have in the system. In addition, for those of you, especially new instructors who are trying to figure out how they can best integrate mental health first aid into their lives, there are a bunch of resources regarding kind of the business aspect of mental health first aid and how you want to move forward with that. So including a pitch deck, which is helpful for established and new instructors, grant proposals, budget templates, and a research summary that goes back to, I think, 2001. It's worldwide, a bunch of really interesting and cool research all collected into one space that you can help provide to your funders, to your employers, to the people that you are hoping to provide this information to. And then our first aider learner's guide. Some of our first aiders would prefer to just learn via reading step by step. So you either can pull information out from the learner's guide to help guide your first aiders, or you can just provide this document to them and it helps them walk through how to best utilize Connect for their class and moving forward. Any questions, any other resources that you all have or have used that you would recommend? You can drop it in the chat or you can unmute.
Well, Leah, Katie put in the chat, there's pre-work for all classes now, including in person.
Correct. And we will talk about that, Katie, in just a minute, because it is true.
And Sequoia says, oh, sorry, do we see this format staying beyond the pandemic?
Sequoia, can you say more, the Connect system or virtual pre-work? What are you looking at?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I was just curious to know, because the first class that I taught, it was all in person. And to be honest, it was because it was more comfortable and easier for me. I would like to get more familiar with the hybrid or doing it virtually, but it's a little intimidating, not necessarily in a bad way. And this isn't something that's like required for work, so I haven't had as much time to commit to learning how to do it the hybrid way or the virtual way. So I was just curious to know, even beyond the pandemic, is this a format that looks like it's here to stay? You know, learning the hybrid way, learning to teach it virtually, or is this more so something to where we're able to teach people during the pandemic?
Great question. And I will also kind of defer to those of you who have been working in this system longer than I have. I started in March, but I foresee the blended for 100% virtual and blended in person being here to stay. I think if anything, the National Council is trying to push, as you in-person instructors have felt, a lot of this to be online so that it is easier to get data and kind of put those evaluations all in one place. So I think the virtual aspect or the digital aspect of this curriculum will absolutely stay.
It's almost impossible for me to believe that they would roll it back at this point. And I will tell you from the Mental Health Association's perspective, we saw the numbers in Maryland really spike during COVID because of virtual delivery. So that was not at all what I expected, but boy, has that been a really great thing that given that delivery system, and we are able to reach more people in jurisdictions where we were not able to hold as many classes before just because of the distance involved.
Any other comments about that question? That was a great question. All right. So I know everyone is just really excited for this information, and I am disheartened to tell you that we do not have any true updates for you regarding this, but we are actively seeking it. We meet with the council as often as we possibly can, and they're juggling a lot right now, so we are getting bits of information as we can, but we are pushing for this information because we are just as excited for it as you are. So that includes the 2.0 in-person curriculum, and the Connect piece of that, which I promise it is next. We're going to talk about it. But that in-person curriculum for the 2.0, we are waiting to hear when that will be published. The teen mental health first aid curriculum is coming to Maryland. We are actively working to receive that curriculum. We are hoping early 2022. We will start providing information on it at least early 2022. And we are very, very excited to roll that out as quickly as possible. And then the modules and mental health first aid in Spanish and potentially additional languages. We have not heard updates on that either. We are hoping that that information comes as soon as we are able to hear about that 2.0 in person as well. So these are questions that we are asking and asking and asking. And the more you ask, hopefully one of us will receive some information and then we can share it with each other. So keep asking. These are incredibly important conduits to our mental health first aid community, and we are excited to have them in Maryland as soon as possible. All right, getting to the nitty-gritty of questions and best practices. So you all submitted a good number of questions when you registered, and if we have time, we will provide additional space for questions that have come up, but we want to kind of get through some of the bigger trends that we saw. So first, just to clarify for those of you who are not in or have just recently gotten into Connect, the instructor portal as of, I believe, Tuesday, whenever the 23rd was, is no longer accessible. Cornerstone, the moment that you get, or Cornerstone and the instructor portal are no longer accessible. Any information that you have in there will need to be requested through the request assistance form, which has a data request subsection. So you can still receive that information, but it's a little bit more of a roundabout way. The Connect system is the learning management system in place now, and is also your instructor portal. So all a one-stop shop. You can get to the store through there. You only need to bookmark the Connect space. Now you can all delete your bookmarks for the instructor portal and Cornerstone. How will prior first aiders access their certifications? So much like those of you who maybe did not get updated when you were put into the Connect system, if you encourage your first aiders to go to Mental Health First Aid Connect and use that forgot password button with their mental health first aid associated email address, it should reset their account. They get an email and they're able to log in and see all their resources and print, download whatever they need to with their certificate. So you do not have to reach out to all your first aiders for that. If they come to you, if you have social media that you connect, however you connect with your first aiders, you can provide that information, but it is also accessible online if they're like, how do I, get my certificate? So making sure that you have this information and not feeling like you need to reach out to every single first aider that you've ever trained. This information is accessible and they will be able to access it with or without your support at this point. Pre-work requirements. I'm going to come back to that one. We're going to talk about it, the in-person stuff. Training units. For those of you who have not run your own class yet, there are no more training units. You are only charged for the people enrolled in your class who attend or who are not marked attended. So what I mean by that is when you have taught your class, say I have 13 out of 15 people show up for my class on Thursday, then you are going to go in and mark attendance within 48 hours, and you are going to unenroll those who did not show up. Those who did not show up will be removed from the system, and you will only be charged for those 13 out of 15 that did attend. So it is nice because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're requesting training units back, but there are some caveats to the fact that you will be charged for someone if you do not unenroll them. All of this is outlined in the user guide, so making sure that you are making note of that and just putting it into your kind of closing of the class kind of flow. Any questions about instructor portal, first aiders accessing their certificates, or training units? Excellent. How to get certified to teach blended virtual. I know many of you are certified in the in-person training. You are able to take the blended workshop that is located in the storefront for the curriculum that you are certified to teach. I believe it is $150. And if anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, it takes about 2 hours to complete. It is not required, but as we mentioned prior, if this format of disseminating this curriculum is going to stay, the blended and virtual, then it might be worth looking into if you want to be able to teach blended classes moving forward. Inviting and enrolling users, we're going to look at that and the current in-person flow, and then talk about technical issues. So our current flow looks a lot like this. So we have our main goal is to get the pre-work, get people into Connect. You're going to invite learners. So that is putting their email into the system, building and publishing a class, and then enrolling learners. So we want to keep that language really specific so that you know which part is needed from you at any given time. So what this looks like is you're going to invite learners first. Learners need to accept an invite and create a profile in Connect. This is their name, email address, and I believe their time zone. This is one of those spaces where after you onboard, give yourself enough time to onboard. You have decided when your first class is. You want to give yourself enough time that learners accept an invitation and then enroll them into the class, which is different than Cornerstone. So making sure that you know your audience, and if it is a work-related thing, if it's a new system for people, making sure that you may have to prompt your learners, provided a little more time, some deadlines, sometimes for people to get sent another link because they can't find the original. give yourself a little bit of that grace period so that you don't have to stress out about it. We have build and publish class. This can occur anytime in the process. So it doesn't have to be after you invite learners, but the way that MHAMD has been doing it right now, which is not the correct way, it is just a way. And I'm curious to hear what you all have been doing. We invite learners for our upcoming class. We have one on Thursday, so I'm just going to keep using this as an example. I invited our learners, and then while I'm waiting for them to accept that invitation, then I build and publish that class because they're not connected at that time. The invited learners and the class are separate. Once those invited learners have accepted their name, email, and times are correct, then I can enroll them. Access to pre-work is instant after that. The pinch point here is that people don't all accept their invitations at the same time. And it can take days, weeks. If you're running multiple courses, it can be really challenging to navigate who is where and when and how they can get through that all at one time without having to just be in Connect every day, all day, enrolling people. So I would like to hear from those of you. I've only taught a couple classes in Connect, and it's usually one class at a time. So those of you who are navigating multiple classes at any given time, I would love to take a moment and hear a little bit how you are balancing that. And then we'll move to the in-person, also kind of sharing our knowledge around that, because pre-work, you're assigned to pre-work, it's 2 hours self-paced when it's a virtual or blended curriculum. There is now pre-work for in-person, which is much shorter, it takes about 5 minutes, but it does require you to invite learners, even if it's an in-person class. You need to build and publish a class, and you need to enroll those learners. There's quotes around pre-work because the pre-work for the in-person is building their little profile and completing a pre-quiz. And then they're just attending 100% in person after that. But knowing that there is a virtual component to in-person classes now has caused a huge shift in how people are able to run these classes. And I know is something that the council is hearing and trying to find a solution to. With that being said, let's talk briefly. I'm going to pull down the screen for a couple minutes and I'd love to hear folks. Let's talk about enrolling learners and if there's been any good way that people have found to do that, if they're navigating a couple classes or a lot of learners, and then talk about the in-person as well and see what people have found to be most useful. Any questions before we jump into that?
Yeah, Leo, we have one question in the chat. So just to make sure that I understand, if we attended the earlier training and were certified, will we need to take an additional training to continue teaching blended courses in the future? And the answer is no if you were certified in virtual and blended. But if you were certified prior to, so the last class we certified in person was March 2020. If you are March 2020 and further back in time, you need to take the class, the little online class that Leah was talking about to get yourself up on certified in virtual and blended. If you were taught, and I apologize, it's actually, we taught some virtual classes in the old curriculum after March of 2020. So the switch, I guess, was really in March of 2021. If you were certified as an instructor in virtual, you don't need to take any other trainings in virtual. If you were certified in person, you need to take those trainings. And we had a couple more comments in the chat, and that is, how soon before the course should you enroll participants?
Great question. So if you are going to, and I'm going to say invite first and then enroll. Invite as soon as you have that list of participants. Give yourself as much time as possible because it may take them some time to realize that they need to create that little profile and then you can enroll them in that class. and you do not have to have that class built when you invite your participants. So invite them as soon as you got their name or whenever that works. For us, we do it 30 days beforehand. We can invite users because we have a list and we're only running one class at a time. For those of you who get participant lists from work or from organizations, you're able to also enroll them as soon as possible or invite them. You can also enroll them once they accept as early as you would like. We would recommend not enrolling them any later than, a week so that they have time to complete that pre-work unless you are building that into their day, which is also an option. Does that make sense? I'm talking to mostly instructors that know how this curriculum is run. So now we're getting kind of into the nuance of what you would prefer. Great.
Katie has a question. I also
Katie.
taught a course on November 8 and 9. Some participants are marked as 20% complete, 60% complete, 80% complete. How long do I need to monitor prior classes for?
That is a great question and something that I will write down. We also are in the same boat. We have participants that have never finished in the last month and a half their post-work or haven't, opened all of their pre-work. We do not have to close classes in Connect. So I assume that it will stay open until their certification expires. This is me just kind of spitballing at this point. If someone has additional information regarding that, that would be great. But I'm not aware of a closure date for a class that they need to complete all of that post-work by. All right. Let's transition to the conversation about enrollment. So you are inviting participants, giving them a deadline, say, please accept this invitation by Friday, and then you are enrolling participants. Or what has worked best for those of you who are coordinating a lot of classes or just have coordinated a class for that enrollment system? Naima?
So yes, I think what you said, Leah, about just kind of working through your own logistics helps. I know for me, I try to invite people no later than 2 weeks out, ensure that they enroll so that I can then, or that they accept so I can then enroll them no more than 1 week out. And then I also send my own email. So what's worked for me is sending an email up front saying, welcome to Youth Mental Health or Mental Health First Aid. Here is what you can expect so that they know that they have to accept the invite and then enroll. So it's not kind of like, what's going on here? So laying out those steps. And then I also find it helpful that you can send a direct link if someone is not getting that invitation to connect. You can go and connect and just copy the direct link for them to enroll so they don't, because sometimes people's spam filters or their work email just isn't getting those connect emails. I think also sometimes those connect emails aren't going out. So I think it's helpful to be able to just provide that direct link so people don't have to go through the rigmarole of connect. So that's been helpful for me.
Thank you, Naima. To reemphasize a couple of those, I will show you briefly what Naima means when she was saying that you can directly send them a link, because every invitation is personalized. You cannot just send out a link to everyone, unfortunately, and fortunately. There are pros and cons to that. And making sure that you're giving yourself enough time. 2 weeks is a great amount of time to really focus people in on this invitation and this enrollment pre-work. And if you give people more time than that, that is great as well. Let me just share my screen real quick and we can show you briefly. All right, so we have our pending users. Please take, don't email these people just because you can see their emails. You can resend. So you see when the last time I sent this invitation was, you can resend, you can delete. And if this user is not getting their invitation, you can send them this link, which is super useful because it is also not a live link. And what we are finding with some of these automated emails, just like Cornerstone, that if you are sending a live link to someone who has a very sensitive firewall, it is often being caught up in a spam filter, and not necessarily just their like junk email, but their company-wide spam filter. So it's much harder to find. So you can send them this link and it won't even be like a click link. They have to copy and paste it so that it is easier for them to get access to if there's a firewall or any sort of sensitive spam filter on their account. So we found that with a couple of different government organizations, police departments, things like that, where there's just a more sensitive security system in play, that is a place where a lot of those invitations are getting caught up. Thank you, Naima. Other people who have some enrollment guidance, or what practices do you currently use? All right, maybe we're all just trying to figure it out together still. That is all right. I do, Naima, just to continue kind of going off what you said, we use a very similar system. We try to get everyone at the very latest enrolled at 2 weeks, gives them 1 week to accept those invitations. We give them a deadline. Actually, we've tried it a couple different ways. Honestly, we've given them a deadline. Accept your invitation by Friday. You can just go in and enroll everyone who's accepted on Friday, and then you can send out a reminder email. Alternatively, you can say, if you have the time and capacity, that you can, you know, every 24 hours at 4 p.m., I'm going to enroll you. So I'm going to go in and see who's accepted their enrollment in the last 24 hours, and I can plug them into classes, or accepted their invitation and plug them in. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. You need to figure out what fits best in your schedule, as well as depending on how many classes that you are coordinating or instructing at any given time. Those of you instructing in person. So I would love to hear a little bit more. I know a couple of you do coordinate or instruct in person. It was a big change having to have people log in online to start that work. Let's hear a little bit about that and how you've made it work so far.
This is Katie. I'll talk.
Thank you, Katie.
So I don't know that I necessarily have any tips or tricks just yet. I've taught one class that we've logged through Mental Health First Aid Connect. We did have some challenges. We had about 4 people in the class that said, well, I got this email, but I thought I was registered for the class. All registration happens with our local community college. So they were confused by that, confused by getting an email from a system that they weren't recognizing. So they either deleted it or, you know, marked it as spam. So I feel like, as you had said, Leah, I'm taking it one class at a time, mostly one day at a time, with logging classes as well. I do find it extremely time consuming, especially, you know, for in-person classes. We're so used to doing the opinions quiz during class, the evaluation during class, the test during class. So it seems like some unnecessary steps that are added that take away instructors' time, and it also takes away participants' time that they didn't know they would have to do beforehand.
Thank you, Katie. That is feedback that we are hearing from a lot of in-person classes. There was so much focus on this virtual and blended push out and rollout of a a system that works for the virtual and blended, because I know Cornerstone was giving a lot of folks issues with that curriculum or that dissemination model. So I want to say that while we are all still learning the in-person hoops that we now need to jump through, that the council is listening and working to address the fact that it is really inaccessible to host 100% in-person class and then require an online component. So continue submitting that information and that feedback to them, and making sure that you're preparing far enough in advance for yourself as an instructor or coordinator, and then preparing your participants, if that is how you're teaching currently, that this is going to be required of us for the time being, and hopefully that will change as we move forward, especially with potentially the publishing of the new curriculum when it comes out.
I definitely appreciate that. And I would echo what Leah says. I work as a coordinator as well. So I often end up getting a lot of questions from our local instructors, but I'd rather them go to the National Council. Leah had said, that gives the National Council a paper trail of seeing how many instructors are giving this feedback. And so if it's just feedback from, little Katie Mack and little Carroll County, Maryland, they might just think it's just a me issue or a Carroll County issue. So definitely submit your questions.
Leah, we have 4 minutes until we all turn into pumpkins. There was a question about the Facebook groups. You want to address that at all, or
Yes.
Naima or someone who's a Facebook person?
Jackie, I saw that. I love that. I'm going to pull up a screen full of next step resources for you all. The Facebook page is not on there, but I will talk about it, I promise. And I would love if Naima has anything to add. I know she is a guiding source of wisdom in that space as well. So we have a couple different additional supports. I know 1 hour, a lot to talk about. On December 3rd, if you are interested on some one-on-one coaching, I've taken all of December 3rd and held it to support you all. So if you are interested, I will send out this PowerPoint. There is a link. Get some time on my calendar and we can talk about building classes, inviting, what you're going to best do to make a flow work when you're doing in person. We can talk about anything that was not addressed in detail enough for you today. The National Council also has a couple webinars coming up, today being one of them, talking about the storefront at 2 p.m. I will send this link out immediately, and then the PowerPoint shortly after. They have a course management, the forums, which we haven't even touched on today, and assisting learners. So working through some of that problem solving with them. So a couple different webinars that the National Council is offering as well. And we have Facebook groups. I will send out links to at least 2 Facebook groups that are really a collaborative space to support virtual instruction, and then a national group that is hosted by the National Council. So there's a lot of troubleshooting, and I've definitely seen some people who work for the National Council responding. It's not just other instructors. So that is another good place to provide some feedback and some good questions and get them noticed by people. So
And
I will
Naima just dropped some links in the chat also.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. So yes, that SSL virtual collab space is phenomenal. It is very active and a place where you are able to kind of talk through any issues with both Connect, but also with the virtual and blended curriculum. I will mention that it has been brought up a couple times in that Facebook group. Continue supporting submitting the request assistance forms, because just because you're addressing an issue in a Facebook group does not mean that it's getting to the people who can fix it. And I'll get off my soapbox now. Any closing thoughts in the last minute? You can get it. Yes, absolutely. It is a great space, a very collaborative, active space. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you for all the work that you do. And please let me know if there are any additional questions that come up, and we will send out a PowerPoint with all this information shortly.